Boker Tov, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ramona Brand, and I am the Director of Youth Learning here at Temple Beth-El in Richmond, Virginia. I'm so glad that you could join me on this virtual tour. I'm happy to show you our sanctuary, and I look forward to speaking with you in person. Right now, we're in the lobby of our space, and we're going to enter our sanctuary. So come on and follow me. We're here in our beautiful sanctuary, which was built in 1930. We are ready to begin celebrating our 90th anniversary as a temple in Richmond. Our name, Temple Beth-El, means the house of God. If you are familiar with your own place of worship, you might be able to look around and see some very familiar elements in this building. Of course, we have our pews on both sides of the aisle where people can sit. And you may notice our beautiful stained glass windows. Our windows line both sides of our sanctuary and were created to represent elements of the life of the prophets. You can see some symbolism in the windows that pertain to Judaism and stories in the Torah, as well as some Hebrew. You might be able to make out some yellow Hebrew letters in that second long window to the right. In the window directly over the exit door, there's a symbol that might be familiar, the burning bush. That represents the bush from which Moses first heard the word of God. So you can see that a lot of the structure in our synagogue and in our sanctuary may be the same as a place you possibly worship in as well. So what makes this a Jewish space? There are some things that you probably haven't seen if you have not been into a synagogue sanctuary. That light on the top of the raised platform behind us is called a Ner Tamid, the eternal light. The platform itself is called the Bima, which is the name for our raised area where our rabbi at his lectern and our cantor at her lectern may be standing during a service. There's also something very special at the back of our bima called an ark. I'm going to go up there and open the ark, and let's see what's inside. Central to Jewish worship is the reading of the Torah. The Torah is a very sacred item in Judaism and is kept in a very special place. In every synagogue sanctuary, the ark is located at the back of the bima, and it's beautifully decorated. I'm going to open up our curtain. And you can see inside many of our beautiful Torahs. A Torah is a scroll that contains the first 5 books of the Bible. It is taken out every Shabbat, every Sabbath, to be read, and there's a certain story or a parsha which is read each week from the Torah. You can see that our Torahs are beautifully decorated, and the symbols on the Torah are an echo back to ancient Judaism and the vestments, the clothing that the ancient priests wore in the time of ancient Israel. A crown would represent the shape of the hat that a high priest would wear, as well as reminding us that Jewish tradition tells us that a crown of a good name is one of the most valuable things that you can have. The mantle over the Torah represents the vestments, the garments that the priests wore, and the shield that goes over, the breastplate that goes over the front of the Torah represents a breastplate that the ancient priests wore that had stones that represented each tribe of Israel. Everything is decorated with a symbol that relates to Judaism. You may see a lion or a crown, or even on the Torah, you'll see tablets representing the 10 Commandments. We have a special pointer here called a yod. A yod means hand, and we use that to read the Torah. The Torahs are the most special things in Judaism. And this special Torah here, which does not have a cloth cover but a metal cover, comes from the Sephardic tradition, which is the tradition from Portuguese and Spanish, Iberian Peninsula Judaism, and is slightly different. It's a scroll, it's a round scroll in a hard metal case that opens up, and the Torah is inside. In a little while, we'll see the Torah itself. This is one of our Torahs. A Torah is made to look like a scroll, and it's made from natural materials, all natural materials. The dowels that hold the two sides of the scrolls are made from wood. The parchment upon which the letters are written is made from sheepskin. It's also sewn together in long sheets with sinew, animal sinew. The words are written with an ink that's made from ground wasp galls, which are like the nest that the baby wasps grow in, and other natural materials to make the ink. It takes over a year to make a Torah. A Torah is handwritten, and the person who writes the Torah is called a shofet. And that person will write the Torah, and each letter has to be painstakingly done by hand. It has to be put in the exact same location as every other Torah. You have to be very well learned to learn how to write a Torah. And if a mistake is made, that sheet actually has to be removed, and you have to start writing that sheet again. Torahs are very valuable because of all of the work and all of the knowledge that goes into them. You will also notice that when I touch the Torah, I do so with this yod. Yod means hand, as I mentioned before, and we use the yod to help us keep track of where we are reading in the Torah, but not touching the Torah, because the oils on our own fingers would ultimately do damage to the ink on the Torah scroll. So we're very careful not to touch the Torah personally. Reading a Torah takes a lot of study. Not everybody can read directly from the Torah, because reading Hebrew can be very difficult. For one thing, Hebrew is read from right to left compared to our English language. The Hebrew in the Torah is written without vowels, so you actually have to learn Hebrew with the vowels first, and then you have to learn how to read them without vowels. And also, if you look closely at the line of Hebrew that's here, there's no punctuation. So you have to know what the words are and where they stop. Right here, I can make out the word asher. It takes a very long time to read Hebrew. Usually during a Shabbat service, the rabbi or the cantor will chant from the Torah, because Torah is not only read, it's also chanted with special tunes. Someone who has attained their bar or bat mitzvah will have learned their Torah portion and will chant that portion. And there are many members of the congregation who will also have the honor of reading from the Torah. Our prayer books have both Hebrew and English written in them, so that you can follow along with the prayers and what is being read in the Torah. Again, the book starts what we would think of as backwards. It starts on the right-hand side, and we read the Hebrew from right to left. In a prayer book, if you can see closely enough, these little dots and dashes that are under the letter or the dots above, those are the vowels. If you want to follow along in the English is on the opposite side of the page from the Hebrew, and then also they will have in it what is known as transliteration, which tells you how to pronounce the Hebrew by using English letters. And so many people can read along with the Torah readers and feel like they are also speaking in the ancient language of Hebrew, the language of prayer. In Judaism, the day of rest, the day of worship, is Saturday. It's called Shabbat. Actually, it starts Friday night at sundown and lasts until Saturday night at sundown, when Shabbat ends. Many Jewish holidays, most Jewish holidays, actually begin the night before. And one of the interesting things about why Jewish holidays and days and months start in the evening is that in the very beginning of Torah, the very first story, Breshit, creation, with the first day, God said, Vayahi Erev, Vayahi Boker. There was evening and there was morning, the first day. And so, because in Torah it says that the day began with the evening, we start our days or our celebrations in the evening. When you come to a synagogue service for Friday night Shabbat, you're going to start by seeing these symbols. A pair of candlesticks, a cup filled with wine, and a loaf of a special braided bread known as challah. The ritual for welcoming in Shabbat is beautiful. We begin by lighting the candles, waving our hands over the candles to usher in Shabbat, and we cover our eyes and we say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. And we bless the lighting of the candles. Then we take our cup of wine and we bless it by saying, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. And we've just blessed the wine and we drink the wine to welcome in Shabbat. And last, not least, and most delicious, we will tear a piece from the challah, and we don't cut the bread on Shabbat, we only tear it. We'll tear a piece of the bread off and hold it up, and also say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And then we say, Amen, and eat the bread. And that begins Shabbat. Several other symbols in Judaism that you might recognize are the things that are worn when people come to services. This is called a kippah. You might notice that I also have one on my head, which we will wear when we come to services or when we are learning Torah in religious school or in the presence of reading Torah. A kippah is a head covering that shows our respect for God. You can have one that's plain, or you can have one that's personalized and fancy. Men and women both wear kippot. It is more common to see a man wearing kippot, but it is becoming more common and more popular for women to wear both kippot and to wear a talit. A talit is a prayer shawl. The talit is worn in services whenever the Torah is taken out and read, on special holidays and also on Shabbat. Because in Judaism there is a prayer for everything, we have a handy reminder on most of our talit that actually says the prayer right there so that you can pick it up, and before you put it on, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivonu lahitatef bat tzitzit. And then we give it a little kiss and we put it around our shoulders like this. We're now going to take a look at the architecture at the top of above our ark, top of the bima. We had learned that a Torah is shaped like a scroll that is unwound, and the architecture at the top, the decoration, is meant to mimic an unscrolled Torah. So you can see that the wooden columns on each side look like the dowels, the wooden dowels, and that each section of the wall behind it mimics a sheet of parchment upon which Torah is written. You can see some familiar symbols up there: stars of David's, crowns, grapes, and in the center we have the 10 Commandments. just below the 10 Commandments, again, is a symbol of a crown with the word keter written, meaning crown, reminding us one more time that the crown of a good name is what we all strive for. So now as we get ready to end our tour of our sanctuary, I'm going to bring you to one last spot. If you were leaving the sanctuary on your way out, you would notice these panels with lights along the back wall. In Judaism, we strive to remember people who have passed. Life cycle is very, very important to us. And there's a special ceremony, a day marking the anniversary of a loved one's death. And that's called a yahrzeit. Right now, all of the lights on our yahrzeit board are lit up because during our high holidays, which have just ended, we will put the lights on for everyone who has passed. In Jewish tradition, you can list the name of a person who has passed, and on the anniversary of that person's death, those lights will be lit up, and so that we say their names at the end of the service, and we can also see the light that they are leaving behind in the world. I hope that you have enjoyed this tour of our sanctuary, and I'm very glad to have been able to share this with you. When you come into a space, a sacred space that might not be your own, you can always look around and find something that is warm and familiar and comforting. And I think it's always a reminder that wherever we are, we can strive to look for the things that bring us together, the things that make us alike.